Hi, me again. So, we're moving on to chapter 1 from our book on tyranny. And it starts, do not obey in advance. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. Anticipatory obedience is a political tragedy. Perhaps rulers did not initially know that citizens were willing to compromise this value or that principle. Perhaps the new regime did not at first have the direct means of influencing citizens one way or another. After the German elections of 1932, which permitted Adolf Hitler to form a government, or the Czechoslovak elections of 1946, where communists were victorious, the next crucial step was anticipatory obedience. Because enough people in both cases voluntarily extended their services to the new leaders, Nazis and communists alike realized that they could move quickly toward a full regime change. The first heedless acts of conformity could not then be reversed. Okay, so I'm going to pause in the book for a second to add my own comments. This is why we need to recognize what is happening right now, because they cannot be reversed, and it's now that the things that can't be reversed are happening. And it feels like Nazism is something that could never happen here. That's my whole life, our whole lives. But it can, and apparently it is. So it's happening right before our very eyes. And so I wanted to bring up something that I had read about years ago in actually an LDS survival manual of all things. It's a long story. So basically it describes a normalcy bias, which I had never heard of before. So it's a survival mechanism that our brains are equipped with that can place us in grave danger when we're faced with something traumatic. Simply put, it causes our brains to insist that all is okay. Everything will return to normal. For most of us who have never faced true peril, normalcy bias tells us that nothing bad will ever happen. This is America. Some people insist when I tell them about the possibility of a deeper depression or hyperinflation. I guess they don't listen. So, this explains why so many Jews continued living in Germany even after they were forced to wear identifying yellow stars and discriminatory laws were passed against Jewish people. Life had been so good for so long that surely things would get better. Jews who could have easily afforded to move out of the country stayed and perished. So we simply expect life to go on as it always has, and our brains are wired to accept that and nothing else. So that was just a little sidebar. I'm not sure how accurate everything is in that book because it's, a religious book, but that resonated with me at the time that I read that years ago. Because of as some of you know, my career was in law enforcement, and I did see a lot of things that were, never going to be reported on in the news. You see a lot of stuff that people don't hear about. There's a lot of things that are behind the scenes that are not, released to the public because there's just no interest really. So bad things happen every day. And so a lot of us go through, especially a lot of us white people go through life just, the police are there to protect us and everything's going to be fine. And, no, people don't shoot at you. That could never happen. But things like that do happen every day in pretty much every city in America. So, back to the actual book. So in early 1938, by then securely in power in Germany was threatening to annex neighboring Austria. After the Austrian chancellor conceded, it was the Austrians' anticipatory obedience that decided the fate of Austrian Jews. Local Austrian Nazis captured Jews and forced them to scrub the streets to remove symbols of independent Austria. Crucially, people who were not Nazis looked on with interest and amusement. Nazis who had kept lists of Jewish property stole what they could. Crucially, others who were not Nazis joined in the theft. As the political theorist Hannah Arendt remembered, when German troops invaded the country and Gentile neighbors started riots at Jewish homes, Austrian Jews began to commit suicide. Unquote. The anticipatory obedience of Austrians in March 1938 taught the high Nazi leadership what was possible. It was in Vienna that August that Adolf Eichmann established the Central Office for Jewish Immigration. In November 1938, following the Austrian example of March, German Nazis organized the national program known as Kristallnacht. In 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, the SS took the initiative to devise the methods of mass killing without orders to do so. They guessed what their superiors wanted and demonstrated what was possible. It was far more than Hitler had thought. At the very beginning, anticipatory obedience means adapting instinctively without reflecting to a new situation. Do only Germans do such things? The Yale psychologist Stanley Milgram, contemplating Nazi atrocities, wanted to show that there was a particular authoritarian personality that explained why Germans behaved as they had. He devised an experiment to test the proposition, but failed to get permission to carry it out in Germany. So he undertook it instead in a Yale University building in 1961, at around the same time that Adolf Eichmann was being tried in Jerusalem for his part in the Nazi Holocaust of the Jews. Milgram told his subjects, some Yale students, some New Haven residents, that they would be applying an electrical shock to other participants in an experiment about learning. In fact, the people attached to the wires on the other side of the window were in on the scheme with Milgram and only pretended to be shocked. As the subjects were, fake shocked, I guess, the participants in a learning experiment, they saw a horrible sight. People who they did not know and against whom they had no grievance seemed to be suffering greatly, pounding the glass and complaining of heart pain. Even so, most subjects followed Milgram's instructions and continued to apply what they thought were ever greater shocks until the victims appeared to die. Even those who do not participate all the way to the apparent killing of their fellow human beings left without inquiring about the health of the other participants. Milgram grasped that people are remarkably receptive to new rules in a new setting. They are surprisingly willing to harm and kill others in the service of some new purpose if they are so instructed by a new authority. I found so much obedience, Milgram remembered, that I hardly saw the need for taking the experiment to Germany. Okay. So that's the end of that chapter in the book. And just some notes that I wanted to say. So in my law enforcement career, I took a lot of classes. And during one of those classes, we talked about following orders. When are you legally required to follow orders? They taught us that you must follow all legal orders from superiors. So if an order is not lawful, you do not and really must not follow that order. Because if you do, you are equally as culpable as the person giving that order. So we're now in a position to ask ourselves, what orders are we willing to follow? And also, don't forget that Anne Frank, her family, and the people hiding them were all considered criminals at that time. So, follow your conscience, people.